back to ARC tutorials. This is Axios complete tutorial series. This is the part 3 of the series and the last part. In the first part we learned about the installation, we learned about the different features, we learned about some of the methods supported by Axios, and we did a basic example with get post. In the second part we did detailed coding for all the HTTP methods available and their usage and how to make requests and how to process the responses. Today we will deep dive into different configuration options which are available to us, like headers with credentials, auth, etc. Also we will learn about interceptors, very important concept of how do you set a particular interceptor, how do you modify request, response, etc. Finally, we'll close this series with error handling and making it elegant. All right. So that being said, let's get started with our coding. Today we have lot to code. All right. So the first example I'm going to show you is with headers, right? And the same thing applies to all the HTTP methods that we'll work with. For this particular series, we are using the JSON placeholder free APIs. These are the RESTful APIs for testing, learning, and all that. We'll be using these APIs. Alright, so that being said, let's get started. I'm going to use this module for today's coding. Let me get rid of this line. Alright, so you can, again, this code remains same. If you are in React, you will probably be doing import Axios from Axios. Okay, if you are in Node.js or Express, you will do require Axios like this. Okay, using require statement. In React, you will write import. If you're doing it in a normal standalone with CDN, you don't have to do anything, just start using Axios. Alright, so that is the basics that you should know. If you are not clear about that, please refer to the previous parts. Alright, let's continue. The first thing we are learning is to headers with Axios. Okay, alright, so I'm going to create a new and let's say get. Okay, again, you can use any method for that matter, can be get, post, put, whatever you would like to use, and use one of these URLs that we have already used, right? JSON type code. This is the URL for that JSON placeholder that we have seen, so I'm going to use that, and I'm saying get the to-dos, right, or from that URL. So that's the URL, and then you can pass params. Okay, and you can pass the details of the configuration. This is a config means you can pass different items to it, like you can pass headers. Okay, and it's an object that you'll have to pass, so here you can say content type, and you can say here application/json or whatever headers you want to pass, right? So that's the syntax. You'll use axios.method name followed by the data. If you are using post, let me show you with post because that's a little tricky. So you'll use post, and then you would have the data body like this, and you would pass the object that key fields, learning, post with headers, body with post headers. Okay, so that's the only difference in get and post and put. You would have this extra data that you will have to pass for post and put. For get and delete, you don't have to, you just have to pass the URL. So here I've modified, I've created a simple instance of Axios, and then I'm going to write dot then, and then function, it will give me a response, and dot catch, and here I'll capture the error if any, and I will log the response, and I will log the error. Okay, simplest code possible to inject a header. So see, this is how you add header to any Axios request. Okay, remember the rule, if it's a guest you won't have the data. Okay, if it's post you would have that. Okay, so this is the simplest thing that we can do, and once we are done, and then I can finally, right, or you can just say once it is done you can send a response in Express and say posted data with headers. Okay, The headers can be anything that you want, application slash JSON, text, PDF, whatever you would like. Alright, I'll go to localhost and load that URL. So it says posted data with headers. That's correct. And it has posted and created a new resource by the ID 201. Okay, and that's how you can see uh, the details of what was sent and whether it created a particular request or not. Okay, um, that's pretty much. If you see here in the headers right now, you have the request header which says content type application slash JSON. Okay, so that's how you can inject any headers that you want in any of the Axios. Okay, so this is an example of headers. Okay, so now next I'm going to show you the details of some other options, like say you want to add with credentials, right? If you are in a network which does not allow you to make a single sign-on or proxy request errors or something, you can add with credentials. You can also add auth, and here you will pass username and say testing, and you can pass password and say testing. Right, so you can pass different configurations here, like header with credentials, auth, etc. Okay, not only just headers, but inside this body object, which is this is Axios config, right, options. So you can pass all these options different. You can do a set timeout, you can set base URL, and lot of other things. Okay, important things are header with credentials and auth. Alright, that's all about the config options for you with the headers. Okay, let's go ahead and I'll comment this so that we can work on others. And next I'm going to show you is concurrent requests. Okay, now what is a concurrent request? Concurrent request means, let's say you have multiple APIs to call and get data from. Okay, you have, let's say, promise 2 and promise 3. Okay, you have 3 APIs that you need to make. Okay, let's copy the URL again. So now see the difference. I want all the 3 to be combined. Okay, that's my requirement. My requirement is I should make 3 API calls, one to to-dos, one to users, get the first to-do, get the first, and then get the first. What else is there? Posts. Okay, get one data from all the 3 APIs. Okay, so now since we learned about headers, I'm going to pass it, and I'm going to type accept and coding. Okay, that's one of the things that will accept. You have different options like deflate and compress for that. Okay, now you can copy the same and add it to all the others. Okay, so see, I'm adding now headers to the API calls. Okay, so basically I have 3 API calls, one for users, one for to-dos, one for posts. Now my requirement is I should get the data from all the 3 simultaneously and then combine the data. That's my requirement. What it also means, these are called concurrent requests, right? So for that we'll use something called promise in JavaScript, right? We have promise dot all, right? That's what we are going to use. Promise dot all, if you see the documentation, it says it takes a array. So promise 1, promise 2, and promise 3. I'm telling it that resolve, right? Resolve all the 3, and then if there is any error, catch it. Okay, perfect. Alright, so once you get what you should do, so if you see, I'm going to build an object out of it. I'm going to say combined data is equal to, and I'm going to say posts data, and here I'm going to say results of 0. It's an array, right? So results of 0 is post data. uh, First one is to-dos. Okay, so first one is to-dos data, second is users data, third is post data. and here it will become 0, 1 and 2. Okay, this is results that we get is an array. Okay, and it will have three values. Once all the three are resolved, we will get a combined data, and I'm going to do a console log of the combined data. Okay, and remember, the output that we get is dot data is where the data will be. If you don't add data, it would give all the request, response, headers, all those details, which we don't want. We only want the actual data. So I'm doing that, and now I'm putting an error console. Alright, now I've started. Now when I run this application, probably we can do a dot finally, and we can put here and say response dot send concurrent request completed. Okay, so this is a simple thing that we can run. Alright, so we have three APIs. The calls are going to three different APIs. If you see here, to-dos, users, and post. I have created a promise, and we are using promise.all to resolve all the three promises. If they are resolved, put them in console log and combine value. If not, throw an error and finally send a request to the API. I'm going to run this. It says concurrent request completed, and if you see the log, you see the post data, you see the users data, and you see the to-dos data. Okay, so there you go. You have all the details that are coming out. Okay, so that is the concurrent requests of how you can handle with Axios. Okay, the next and important thing is what we are going to learn is let's learn interceptors, and then I'll come to the error part. Okay, so what are interceptors? Interceptors are beautiful mechanism that you can modify, right? You can modify, update your request or response. Okay, there are two types of interceptors: request interceptors, and there is response interceptors. Okay, now request interceptors means if you want to modify or update your request before it is made, before it is called. Okay, you want to add some headers, you want to check some details, you want to inject some secret tokens, etc. You can do that by interceptors. It will do before it is called, before API is called. Okay, before the endpoint is called. Response interceptors means when you receive, right, when you receive the response, you can do the modification, update, processing, transform, anything that we want to do with the response. Those are called interceptors. Okay, now let's see how we can do that. So we need to move this code to the top. Why? That means before we make the call, right? So that's why we should define it at the top, somewhere here. Okay, before you even make the API calls. So interceptor should be the first thing you will define in your code. Alright, so how do you define it? You'll write Axios dot interceptors dot which type, request or response, then use, and then you define. See here it says interceptor route handler, right? So this is where you will write the basic code which would get you the details. Okay, now let's go ahead and implement that. So for that we are going to do simple. I'm going to write a request. When request comes, I'm using ES6 shorthand annotation, but this explains this will open up just like any other uh, oh, sorry, just like any other method that you will have. Okay, same way you will finally have error handler. See, so you can say, okay, so this is request and this is error. Now what I want to do is, let's say I want to add few headers before I make any API call. So I'm going to say request dot headers, right? Now here what I'm doing, request dot headers, and then I am saying that I want to add a new header and I want to call it start time, and I'm going to give new date. I'm also going to inject a secret, okay, secret key, and give some, let's say this is my secret key. Okay, Once you have done all the modifications, you need to return that request. Okay, in the error, same thing. If you find anything, it's a promise, right? uh, Axios is a promise based thing, so you, if there is an error, you just reject it with a message or something. And you can also give a custom message and say unable to make request. Okay, and return this. That's it. So this is how you use a interceptor. That means you will write axios.interceptors.request if it is a request. If it is a response, I'll show you in just a bit, but first let's test this out. Okay, that's it. pm run start. Okay, now I'll go here. Okay, so it's done. It made our call, but okay, so now let's see the data that we get. Okay, check for headers. We need to check for headers. Okay, so if you see this header now, you see these two entries in the header: start time and secret key. This is the what we have added in our interceptors, right? That means before you make a request, add these two to the header. Okay, so that's how you add interceptors for request. Same thing you can add for interceptors dot response dot use. Okay, now this is where you will define what I should do with the response, right? Again, you want to handle something, you want to add a new ID value, some anything, let's say count or anything, so you can just modify it here. You can say response, and then there is an error. Okay, and then you have this, and in the response I'm going to say response dot headers. I'm going to say um, organization verified equal to true. So again, it can be any, it can basically be anything and everything that you want to add. Just make sure that you return that particular response, and same way you can handle the promise dot reject, and you will throw some unable to process response and return that, right? So this is how all your responses now will have a header called organization verified. Okay, let's see how it works. Okay, now it's completed. If you see the response headers now, and it's not just headers, basically you can do anything and everything here. Okay, so make sure that you don't get confused with that. So this is our request header. If you see the request object, and in the response you can see verified. Let's check the response headers: content, start, authorization, start, key. Okay, let's check. One second, let's check that entire at the start. Headers, you have organization. Let's check if we find that. So you see here, organization verified is true, set to true as part of the response headers, right? So that's how basically you can do with anything. If you want to change data, right, you can do that. You in your response, if you want to add something to the data, you can say response.data, and if you want to edit a particular title of it, you can empty it. You can do a lot of things. Okay, the idea is know about the syntax and how to use it. So this is how you will use axios.interceptor.request.use, and here you will use axios interceptors.response.use. Okay, it's the same code for React, nodejs, express, or standalone. Don't get confused with that. Okay, all right, so that was interceptors. And the last thing in the tutorial that I want to cover is the example with errors. Okay, a lot of times you will get errors from API. How do you handle them elegantly is one of the key things. Okay, like you just can't say that something went wrong. You have to be specific about whether it is the client side error, whether it is a server side error, etc. Okay, so what we are going to do is make it elegant, like we can write responses differently. Let's see that now. That is applicable to all the methods. So inside the catch statement, so far we have been just writing like this, console.log e. Okay, but instead you can make it more elegant. Okay, how? I'll show you. And this is the same for all the methods, so don't get confused. Okay, all right. So once we do catch, then the first thing you will do is if e dot response. What this means is that we made a API call. Okay, we got response from server. Now this is important because sometimes if you make a request in the URL or anything, it won't even come inside here because there is no response from server. You made a wrong call. Okay, so that's why. Or we have to check if e dot request. That means while making a request, do we have any error? Okay, so first you handle the response, then you handle the request. For everything else you can put a else. Okay, and here you can say console.log something bad happened. We don't know, it can be anything, it can be for any various reasons. Okay, this could be a setup or anything of those sorts. Okay, but if you want to be again more specific, you can just mention the e dot message. That's the message that we got. Okay, now let's handle the response. Now we know that from server when we get error, it's usually 500 errors. Okay, 5xx. That means usually it will be in 501, 504, etc. Anything which starts with 500 is a server error. So you know that there was a response, and you can check the status of it. Okay, you can log the status and say e dot status. It will give you this number, whatever number, 501, 500, etc. You can also check what message you got from that. So you can say e dot data will give you the exact message that you got from the server. And finally, you can also verify whether if it was something wrong with headers. So you can take these three values and put it, or you can verify and show it more elegantly. If status is 500, you can show a photo, maybe a beautiful image or message. If something message is there, you can change the message, etc. Okay, so those are important from response point of view. Okay, I'll show you a quick example. If you say e dot status is equal to 500, then I'm going to change my message, right? So I'm going to say console.log or send message, whatever, and we will say server is not available right now. This is a message I want to show instead of saying that server unavailable. Okay, so see, this is one of the classic examples that when something goes down in your server, how do you beautifully and elegantly handle it? Same thing. Now let's say you did not make a response. That means it failed even before you make a request. How do you handle that? So that's where you would check that while making an error itself you got something wrong. So I'm going to say e dot request and console.log. I think it's data again. Let's check. Okay. Alright, so this is how you can elegantly handle. With this piece of code you can apply to any HTTP method: get, post, put, delete, anything that you want. Okay, so this is how you should write a common catch code and call it everywhere. Okay, so you can just make it into a method and call it everywhere else. Okay, so that you have a unique error handling response. You don't have to write it again and again. So copy that code, make it a standard error messaging system that will work, right? I hope it's clear, and before I leave you, I'll demo this one piece, and then I'm going to make a mistake in this particular code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to screw up this URL. So we are making a request even before we get a response. So we are talking about this code block now, line number 67 and 68. Okay, because since we gave a wrong URL, it won't even have any response, right? And that's why we'll see this one. Let's see. Okay, so something bad happened. undefined, right? It came here. Okay, so like that you can check which data you have and how you can manipulate that. Okay, so it is saying 304. Okay, so that is the error we are getting. Okay, now that's exactly what we want. Something bad happened, unable to process response. Okay, so that's how it is giving. Okay, so basically you can customize that error messaging however we want in terms of that the data that you're seeing is because of this. Okay, console log, so don't get confused with that. The data you might be seeing, so you might think it's working, it's not actually. Okay, see here, something bad happened, unable to process, and its status is 304. Okay, it doesn't know what to do. Got it? So that's all about error handling that you should know about Axios. Like I said, write a common method for all these and just call it everywhere wherever you're making a request with any method: get, post, put, or delete. All right, that completes this part. I hope I have covered all the details that you want. I covered headers, config options, I covered concurrent requests, I've covered errors example, I've covered interceptors, and that's all that you need to know and learn about um, Axios. That I hope at the end of this series you are also confident and you will be able to make use of Axios in your applications. If you have any doubts, please reach out to me at surya.aradhya@gmail.com. I always love to hear from all of you. Also, please, if you have any doubts, you can reach out to me in comment section. I have authored a JavaScript book which will help you, so you can check that out at arctutorials.gumroad.com. Please subscribe, share these videos with your friends and colleagues, and like them if you like my work. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoy and learn Axios. Happy learning. Thank you.